Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, Your Stars Align. This is your host Carmina, Vedic astrologer and reader with the cards of truth. So today I thought I would talk to you guys about something that I use quite frequently, and I find it very useful. I used it for myself and I recommended it to friends and to clients, and I haven't had any complaints. I only heard good things about it, right? And that thing we can call a remedial measure, and they're called Bach Flower Remedies, right? And before we get right into the topic, I just wanted to quickly remind you guys, if you're interested in developing your astrological knowledge, myself and my colleague, Vedic astrologer Levi Kosin, will be hosting a series of 4 classes on the psychological ramifications of planetary fulfillment, Lajitadi Avashtas. We'll be looking at how planet relationships in the chart influence our behaviors, both positive and negatives, and we're also going to be strategizing how to make the best of what we have, right, of our potentials, and how to alleviate and don't get stuck in the negative behavior patterns. Okay, also so this will start this Friday, March 30th, right? And this will be the first of 4 classes, and then on Saturday I will be hosting a workshop, right, a webinar on the cards of truth, and we'll be looking at how to analyze, the natal spread, and if you have like questions, if you're studying and you're stuck, we can discuss that. Okay, so Bach Flower Remedies, right? I honestly had no idea what Bach Flower Remedies were until I took Ernst Wilhelm's classes on the topic, right? I had never heard of them. So Bach Flower Remedies are actually, some flower essences. You take some flower petals, you put them in some alcohol, and you can leave them in the sun and they'll get distilled, and you get these flower essences, right? What is this name Bach? Who is this? Is it Johann Sebastian Bach, the famous music composer? No, it's actually a doctor, right? Dr. Edward Bach. He was a doctor from the United Kingdom. He was not a quack. He went to University of Medicine. He had an established practice. He studied bacteriology, and he was also head surgeon at the hospital. So he was a established and respected doctor, right? And he was also a researcher. He was testing out remedies based on bacteria at first. So he was doing his thing, right? He was doing his job. And one day in 1917, after like many days of operating on soldiers that were coming in wounded because of World War I, he just collapsed one day, really, and he was rushed himself into surgery. And they discovered he had a tumor. He was losing a lot of blood. He had a large hemorrhage. And after the surgery, the doctors that operated on him, they only gave him like 3 months to live. And so Dr. Bach was like really pressed, like he felt that he had more to say in the field of medicine, and he had he felt that he had to fulfill his life purpose. So he started testing different remedies than the classical ones based on bacteria, like antibiotics, or like not classical, like normal modern medicine remedies, right? So After that event and his surgery and him being given only 3 months to live, he started testing out more alternative methods of medicine, and he came across flower essences, right? And the 3 months passed, and he didn't die, obviously, but he was just getting stronger and stronger. And he had some realizations, he had some insights, right? That our health issues are in fact largely due to the consciousness of separation between our higher self and our lower self, right? And with these flowers, he found a way to communicate, right, between our lower self and our higher self, thus establishing a connection and a more harmonious way, for emotions to flow freely, and so that we can go on with our everyday lives, right? So, yeah, Ernst Wilhelm says in his classes about the Bach Flower Remedies that, it's like it's really as helpful as meditation because it really works on an emotional level, but it's not going to get you enlightened, right? So it's not going to get you enlightened, but it's going to solve your emotional problems in order for you to cope with the everyday struggles of this existence, right? Yeah, so this is like in a nutshell. And also one thing that I really like that Ernst says about the Bach flowers is that, the only karma-free things that you can eat in this world, right, that you can consume and are nourishing are fruits and flowers, right? Flowers because the petals of a flower are not essential for its well-being, so the plant can live without them. And the fruit, well, that's meant to be eaten, right? That's the host of the seed, so it's meant to be eaten. But like the rest of the things, like even the leaves on a plant, it causes stress, and you still have to burn that little tiny amount of karma at some point if you're really considerate about those things, right? Okay, so yeah, Dr. Bach, after that, he spent years and years in the 1920s and the 1930s, like 10 years really researching and practicing, testing his flowers that he developed. He developed 38, right? 38 remedies. Of 38 flowers, of the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of flowers that exist in the world, he isolated 38. And before his death, like really shortly before his death, he started associating zodiac signs to certain flowers because he discovered some patterns, and he was recommending the flowers based on the person's sun, moon, and ascendant zodiac sign, right? But however, these results were mixed, right? So not always were they like treating the person. And Ernst says it's because, maybe these signs and these signs were like not afflicted by Saturn or Rahu or by other bad avashtas, so that's why it didn't work, because Earth's strategy is to treat the signs and the planets that are afflicted. And by afflicted, I mean especially if they are with Saturn or Rahu, the North Node, because these are like the great separating influences that cut us off from our connection to the universal consciousness, God, whatever you want to call it, right? So yeah, so the way that I also use like the Bach flowers is to treat Saturn first, of course, and also to treat Rahu, and to treat first the houses that are affected by Rahu or Saturn, and then by Ketu and other things. And so first the houses, then the signs, and yeah, and the planets at the same time, because we have remedies associated to the signs and remedies associated to the planets. And every sign has 3 stages, right? And these stages like correspond to the seriousness of a person's problems. For instance, let's take Libra, for instance. So as I was saying, there are 3 stages, and how you can assess in which stage a person is, it's simply by asking them some questions, right? If you take the courses, I'm not gonna talk to you guys for 4 hours. I'm just like giving you a briefing on what they are. So so a person can be respective to that emotion in the communication stage, they can be in the compensation stage, or they can be in the final like breakdown stage of really depressing decompensation stage. And you will notice that the signs are grouped by axis. So for instance, Libra, Aries are one axis, and they have different communication and compensation flowers, but the breakdown flower is the same, because like um, opposites opposite polarities tend to be the same, right? If we think like a circle, like the coldest cold burns as much as the hottest heat, right? And that's why the decompensation stage is the same for opposite for the opposite signs. So for instance, for Aries, if we have for instance Saturn in Aries or Saturn in the first house, we would treat Aries because the houses correspond to the natural zodiac. So the first house corresponds to Aries. And that flower for communication, right? If the person is only slightly afflicted, you would use chestnut bud. And that takes care of mistakes, inner haste, and indifference. But then if you ask the person the right questions and you see that they are like in a deeper phase of compensation, then you try to heal that. For instance, for Aries or for the first house, if you have Saturn there, you can recommend oak, right? Because that makes one overly dutiful. But then it may arrive that a person is really like at the last stage, right? So for instance, if somebody has Saturn in the first house and they're like in the last stage of the compensation, they may be critical and intolerant. They would be unwilling to make any to cut any slack to themselves or other people. So that's like the really last stage. But we need to really to treat from the more superficial to the more serious, right? So first we would treat the house, then the sign, and first we would treat like the communication stage, and then compensation and decompensation. So yeah, these are kind of, I have a lot because I told you I use them for myself and I make them for my friends and for clients. They have no side effects. I know there is a company, I mean, I'm not sponsored obviously by anyone. There is a company with the name Bach on them, but you can use any company, right? Any company that makes flower essences. Uh, this one that I use is called Crystal Herbs. It's from the UK, and I like that they use organic brandy in the flower essence. And yeah, the way we mix them is you have to put for one treatment at most 7 flowers, right? So that's the maximum number of flowers, and the results will be seen like within 3 days. And but you have to take a treatment from 4 to 6 weeks, right? And so how they actually work is like to treat us on an emotional level. For instance, if you have, because we spoke about like the 8th house, if you have an afflicted 8th house with some Rahu or Saturn there, it's good to be recommended Aspen, because that helps you with dealing with intangible fears. And then if you suffer like in a more deeper stage, agrimony is good for you, because that I mean, that person behaves in a way that they hide the stress and they turn to addictions. And agrimony is good for that. And when I say like it's good for it, don't expect like Bach flowers to be some kind of sedatives or suppressants, because you know they have to bring like out the emotions in order for you to deal with them. So in the beginning you might be feeling like crap emotionally, but then, I mean, once the connection is established between the higher and the lower self, then you will be more like, you will have a more wholesome perspective and your emotional life will be more balanced. Okay, guys, so like this was my rundown on Bach Flower Remedies. If you're interested in finding more about these, you can take Ernst's classes because he really classifies them very well, and they're very clear. It's very clear how to use them. Also, I usually, like with the consultations, with the readings that I do, I recommend Bach Flower Remedies. So if you want a consultation, just write to me, go to my website, yourstars.align.com, find the reading section and book a reading. Okay guys, that was about it for today, so see you soon. Bye!